Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Pinball Arcade. So today we're looking at Paragon. I've kind of slept since I last played, so like the last run of games I played in a row was pretty much for a whole day. I played Jack's Open and Wildcard and Genie then Gorgar, and I particularly didn't like Wildcard or Genie. Paragon looks like it might be very similar to Genie. Um, in that it has a lot of cleavage and a bikini clad lady in the art, although the word paragon does not imply like a Middle Eastern uh, theory, so this might be more of a focus around just fantasy in general. Let's see. I also logged in and made an account for Pinball Arcade. I've also done a bit of research, like Pinball Arcade itself in the menu seems a little poorly programmed, and the Pinball FX2 definitely felt like it wasn't playing and running the physics quite right. The um, so I'm hoping that at some point I would get around to playing Pinball FX3 and taking a look at if the engine for Pinball FX3 runs a little bit better. A lot of the real world tables in Pinball FX3 are the exact same tables I've already purchased once on Pinball Arcade. I did experiment with trying to get Pinball Arcade to run in cabinet mode, but as far as I can figure, it kind of doesn't work unless you have a rotated screen, so it's in portrait mode instead of landscape mode, which almost no computer would have without it being a special setup. And it seems like it needs a key that, as far as I can tell, is not available for sale anymore. A license key, and it costs like $600. Um, and so you run into this scenario where around October 2020, which in pandemic times, it's not surprising that nothing new has happened since about October 2020 for Pinball Arcade or Pinball FX. Frankly, there may just not be any more pinball tables being manufactured, but there's plenty of old ones there. But about October of 2020, that seems to have been just the entire collapse of any interest in competition between Pinball Arcade, Pinball FX. That wouldn't be too far away from the At Games real world pinball cabinet, and At Games is selling once again the same tables, a lot of the same tables, in packs of 11 tables for $50. So you buy a relatively cheap but still fairly expensive uh, LCD screen built into a pinball cabinet that is still probably going to be scaled down a little bit and not the actual size of a real pinball table. Which, in all fairness, you would have kind of a hard time finding a monitor that was the right size for the length of a real world pinball table playfield. You would probably have to overshoot it and put something close to a 42, 48, 50, maybe even 60-inch monitor inside a pinball cabinet with a fairly thin bezel, and then you might just have to black out one side of the screen to get the right angle, because it's not like pinball tables really are guaranteed to be 16 by 9 resolutions. Anyways, and on top of that, you kind of, if you're going to make a virtual table emulator on top of that big monitor, then you kind of need a smaller monitor for the backboard that you can either split into two separate monitors with software, or you have to have then two smaller monitors, because there definitely are some pinball tables that have kind of a um, top scoring backboard and then a smaller monitor that would do little LCD effects. The technology was very state of the art when it first came out, but it's pretty incompatible with standard ways of designing things. If you did buy an AtGames system and you weren't messed up by the scale, you can use an AtGames um, toy virtual pinball cabinet as a screen and controller. So there probably is a way where you could get very close to what you're looking for by having either Pinball FX or Pinball Arcade games already purchased. But there's no working together there at all, and you would think that they would want to work together, particularly since AtGames does have the one success in the fact that there is a Walmartification going on with those products where they're getting cheap enough and they're getting reasonable enough to ship that it is not crazy to potentially give that as a present, as a Christmas present to a child, and even knowing they wouldn't play with it that much. Anyways, let's read the title here instead of just sitting here. Paragon came out in 1979. It's the last 1970s game we have. It was designed by Greg Kimmich and drawn by Paul Ferris. This beautifully illustrated table was the first supersized wide body table made by Bailey. So it's another wide body. I did not like Genie. This table was one of the first to use inline drop targets in the Valley of Demons to score points and multiply the bonus. The table also features 4 flippers on the playfield to control the ball away from the Beast Slayer, the dangerous outline gap under the pop bumper on the left. This table challenges players with every game. It is a great game to hone flipper control and nudging skills into the exciting world of Paragon. Some of these descriptions definitely feel like they are written differently from different perspectives than other things. Interestingly, this one has a pro option where you can open the coin door, which I don't know why that would be there per se, and I don't know why you would need that. The idea of digitally controlling whether the coin door could open or not seems like a really terrible idea, and it also has like an operator mode. See, that's crazy, because if there was even the slightest way to trick or trigger the coin door to open, then people would rob you blind, and you would deserve it, frankly. And that's why I would have assumed almost every single pinball table would have not had any interconnection really to the coin acceptors and all of that. That there would just be a signal sent to the rest of the pinball from the coin acceptors, which the coin acceptors had to be interchangeable depending on whether you were going to use quarters or tokens or some other currency. So this looks like it's quite the pinball table here. We definitely are hitting that point where we have a decent amount of stuff going on. It's not going to be boring. What gets me here is the Super Saucer score. Just does not seem to be in line with this fantasy world of monsters, kind of a Beastmaster theme that's going on. The Gold Cliffs makes sense. And you have like all kinds of monsters all over the place. Somebody spent a decent amount of time creating creatures and drawing, and then you have a big chess guy with demon wings and a spear, And then you have a 1979 depiction of a bikini-clad lady. The fact that her bikini is blue is, I think, particularly interesting, because I don't know what kind of cloth you could use to have blue-colored cloth. But yeah, tiny, tiny bikini, and definite indications of her nipples poking through. You have a different blue bikini on this character up here, which her hair is in a different comb style. So, and this one has like blue eyeshadow, and this one doesn't seem to have blue eyeshadow. So it seems like there's two characters, where this guy here seems to also be different than this guy. So there's like 4 different characters. And see, she has a green like sash around her arm, and he has a green devil wing. When we look to the black backboard, we once again see that we have a chained lady with a blue bikini, and she's being attacked by the monster. This looks like a third animation of a different lady, which honestly could just be a different artist, 3 different artists being hired to draw the relative same description. And then we have another guy attacking the monster. I'm still not really sure where Paragon comes into the role. I did say in the game Celsius, what was it? Celsius 37, that there was a lady in the tube and you were raising up the thermometer temperature, and if that game was a little older, you would have had some implied bondage of her being tied up in the tube instead of just kind of floating in the tube, to make it look like maybe it was someone that was helping her medically, doing some kind of experiment to save her. Now we have direct implied bondage and sacrifice. Not too different from Gorgar, the last table we played, so that they are definitely stealing from the same sources as far as ideas. This is a fairly detailed, hand-painted or hand-drawn image when you zoom in for the backboard. Like, this is real art, and in a funny way, you kind of don't have a lot of opportunity for real art in the world these days, because a lot of video games and such aren't going for the single stationary image. They're not going to give any thought to should there be skulls here, and how much detail should I draw in the skulls, or how much detail should I draw in the muscles of the claws of this character. But there are real efforts here to make this stand out and catch people's attention. I've also noticed that seemingly some kind of randomization has happened with the tables in the area, because in the back of the walls now look different, and very slightly to the left there looks like there's a picture on the wall. If we can just watch the attract mode for a second, you just get the slight frame of a windowsill or a picture, like, or maybe that is even a different pinball table that is just supposed to be implied there, but not teased, in the sense that they don't want to show an actual product. You can see that the Pinball Arcade sign is just barely showing at the bottom. Cabinet mode would basically have blacked out all the backgrounds and just shown the table itself and not even the edges of the table. And ideally, that you would want that just to be an option in the main game, and not have to pay potentially $600 to have that option. Let's look at the flyer. I also did look, and there is an arcade relatively close to where I am. It'd probably be about an hour's drive from where I live to play pinball, and it is a scenario which I assume is true for a lot of arcades, where you pay about $11 to get in, and all the arcade machines are set to free play. They do have a decent collection of maybe about 20 to 30 pinball tables, and they are very iconic, famous pinball tables. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the older pinball tables are being converted or scrapped. More than likely, they're being scrapped for parts to maintain the more popular pinball tables. So, assuming the arcade maintains their pinball tables fairly well, paying $11 to come in and spending 3 or 4 hours probably playing each pinball game for at least 30 minutes would, maybe the math doesn't quite work out there, but that wouldn't be crazy. But you have a couple different scenarios that in an arcade like that could happen. You could get to the arcade and realize that half the games are broken. You could get to the arcade at a busy time and realize that you have to stand in line, and so you're spending half your time waiting, kind of like a Disneyland effect. Or you could get to the arcade and just find the experience not as fun as you think it would be for some other reason, whether it's noisy or whether there's a bunch of like precocious children, rude children running around. Like this arcade that I'm looking at does have certain limitations as far as children, that they can't just be unaccompanied minors running around, that there are curfews enforced. So it does seem like it might be a better experience. But what it also didn't seem like was that the arcade wasn't really searching to do party rental locations, where that was a thing that happened at arcades a decade ago or so, is that you would have a lot of focus. I'm taking forever to start playing here. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, you would definitely have a lot of focus around the idea of having someone rent out the entirety of the arcade, or rent out about half of the arcade and get special treatment. Yeah. You would think when pressing the B button on the controller and cycling the different camera angles, there would just be a camera angle that would let you zoom in completely and unlock that cabinet mode for sure. But you don't. There might be a camera angle here where you might be able to leave the entire... I've got another one of those skins enabled. We're getting, again, more digital sound effects, and I would say you are at least a generation ahead already on the sound effects. For comparison to Gorgar, this is another one of these tables where it has kind of a pointless third flipper. And going wide and adding a third flipper, all of that just seems kind of ridiculous. There really is just no camera angle here that works. Let's see. And this seems like you can toggle off the heads-up display. I didn't realize you could do that. I guess X turns the follow off. So best case scenario, if you were going to try to have a cabinet mode and just try to simulate it, you would have to you'd have to probably have it like this, and then just take whatever weird resolution this is and crop it. And yeah, this is probably one of the worst setups I've seen with a three flipper situation, or two flippers on the right, because the flippers on the right make a scenario where it is very easy to accidentally drain the ball in between the two flippers. This game also doesn't let you change the balls number, so you get 3 balls anyways, and this is definitely not a table I'd want to play very, very often. I like the busyness of it, but if I literally can't change the number of balls, then I'm not enthusiastic about it at all. And I've slept since I last had my bit of negativity, so I think I'm probably accurate here. So ideally, I probably do want to just play this way and not pay any attention to the scores. And we would just have to wonder and check as far as like standard goals. This might have been kind of the perfect table to play this. But also, it seems like even if you do tap Y, it just resets the heads-up display after that. You can kind of tell how a lot of pinball tables are built completely around the simplistic idea of they need some ward to line up, even if it's like a ridiculous ward. Like Paragon in this case, I think, is a particularly pointless word that doesn't play any real role in the story. But once again, the flippers feel very weak at this angle. Like, you know, I am struggling to possibly get the ball all the way up. We still don't have a central peg. We still don't have a ball saver. We still don't have any kickbacks. This design in particular seems not even around hitting specific things to spell Paragon as much as just giving you a random letter that you hadn't already collected, but when you accomplish several things. So I would say this is kind of a fairly low skill game from the feel of it, with the exception of the fact that you are potentially gonna drain the ball out very fast. Apparently, the non-electromechanical tables are called solid state tables, which I guess that makes sense, in that solid state circuitry would be one way to describe transistors and circuitry, a modern circuitry design. Yeah, I really, really hate that double flipper on the right. Get rid of that one part and I would be a little bit happier, but I kind of hate the wide screen, the wide tables. I kind of hate that there seems to not be much of a focus here or much of a high score here. Bringing the score back down to 5 digits when at this point we've seen plenty of other tables that were up to 6 digits. whether that went up to 199,990 or whether it went up to 990,000, 999,990. And I would say, even though this one has only 5 LCD digits, it's still not going to be able to bring the score down by 1. That digit on the far right will always be a 0, I'm sure. And that's the only argument you could make, is that the counter was going to bring it down by 1 digit and then start counting by 1 single point. I can't really think of anything you could do in a pinball game that would feel justified to be worth only 1 point, considering how everything else is worth 200-300 points. It's kind of like the lack of usefulness of a penny. Like, there's literally nothing in 2021 where you could earn a penny and want to be paid a penny for anything. If you have a penny, you either give it away for free because it's so useless, or you throw it in a change drawer and hope that you can at least get up to a quarter. Most people don't care at all. That bumper in the lower left-hand corner is kind of a pointless addition. It is just hiding the fact that there's nothing there. Like, that might as well have been just a empty space, which that does pretty much imply to me that this was a table designed not to be a wide body table originally and got converted into a wide body table. At least with Genie being a wide body table, it made sense because there was that whole upper play field and then there was a whole nother lane. It was like there was 2 tables combined. But here, it really doesn't make any sense at all. And yeah, this feels like this could have been a very, very short episode if I hadn't decided to go on a rant. There's also some weirdness as far as how I'm going to schedule these episodes and how I'm going to label them, considering how I've already played or spotlighted some of the tables that were originally free to play or that I originally had about 3 years ago. I guess the easiest way to do it is just make a whole new series, put parentheses, put 2021 around it. Don't try to make new episodes that are years apart, because I'm sure my style has completely changed in that time, and that would be kind of crazy. It'd be like continuing a TV show that's been off the air for 10 years, which they have done that several times, and always feels awkward to say the least. I can't imagine actually ever succeeding at spelling Paragon, though. This is much like Gorgar, a table that's all about getting that end bonus, which is not crazy for a table by any means. Like, that's fairly normal, but unlike Gorgar, which is a very simplistic table where there are only 5 or 6 things to hit and you know what you're hitting and you know what happens when you do hit them, there's just flashy visual stuff all over the place on this table, and stuff I don't feel like I would successfully hit very often, if ever. This upper playfield left flipper is only designed to shoot to the side drop-down targets on the right. The top area in that drop-down target seems to be like a very high focus target, but the really only way to get up to that is either through a lot of luck or through hitting the 4 drop down targets on the left, or the lane on the right. So this doesn't feel like a very center shot focused table. I can certainly see why they would say that this table would require a lot of nudging, because there's clearly a lot of play opportunity to sink a ball and drain a ball. When you're playing with 3 tables, with only 3 balls, that's a mess. Alright, well, let's go back to the exploration mode. I want to look at this just a little bit closer. This whole beast layer, just terrible design. It's just to hide the fact that there's nothing for half of this table. This drop down targets for the Valley of the Demon are crazy, and no multi-ball, I don't think. And then still not sure why there's a saucer, because that kind of makes it feels like there should be a tower, not like a mage's tower, not some kind of UFO saucer. It's what I think of when I hear saucer. So I think that's probably mislabeled. And then you have the launcher lane and this little side lane where nothing can actually happen on the side lane. So this is zigzag like this specifically so that it can take up more space again. Then you have this in lane with the double flippers, which there's no reason for the double flippers because this upper flipper is going to hit this area, and the lower flipper would still easily hit that area. There's no difference there. This left flipper is pointless because it's only for these drop down targets. If anything, we're kind of seeing a running theme with the more the artwork is trying to sell on sex, the worse the game tables are, or extremeness. There's a light here. I wonder what that's supposed to represent. And then here you have like markings on the plungers, and these plungers are also weak. I did look at the FAQ as far as why Pinball Arcade at some point said they were unlikely to do any more electromechanical tables, older tables. And yeah, they just said that in general there doesn't seem to be much of a desire there, that there's not a lot of interest. And inherently that is kind of the problem with pinball in general, is that how do you build up interest in pinball when most people are going to be very far away from an arcade and will only see a pinball arcade cabinet maybe once a year at most in their life, and they just won't have that enough time to even develop an interest, let alone being able to see the older tables. So I don't know how you build up interest without doing kind of what Pinball Arcade did, which was to have a lot of trial modes and try and get people to play them. And Pinball Arcade at least did do a good job of releasing some version of Pinball Arcade on every single console and iPads and iPhones and Android and all that, even if sometimes the tables I don't think actually moved over, so you would end up buying the same tables multiple times. Here they're even saying, because of this, the ball cannot be cradled in the left flipper, which cradling a ball is something that professionals want to do. Like that makes it very, very, very hard to have anything on the right side. You basically want to play with the left flipper only. So yeah, you are just in this weird scenario where you can't build interest in pinball very easily without giving it away for free. And then you can't make the pinball tables for free because the physics is kind of unique and you need to be able to program a custom code on top of maybe a custom engine or maybe Unity. But there's going to be a lot of custom codes, a lot of physics codes, a lot of stuff that can be faked and not dealt with in a first-person shooter, for instance. So you have to put a lot of work on it. You have to pay a lot to license tables, or you make your own tables like Pinball FX2 does to offset that. And Pinball FX2, FX3 also seem not to really have succeeded that way. At Games actual in-house toy cabinets probably are the things that would build any new interest. But that is also going to be new interest for new games. It's not going to be interest. It's not going to be real interest for the old electromechanical tables, which frankly are just going to die out. It's a shame we don't have the Star Trek technology for a holodeck or something where we could just make out of nothing an old pinball table appear, so it doesn't take up space and it doesn't take up resources like money or electricity. But because we can't do that, programming some of the older, lesser known tables from the older times are historically relevant somewhat and interesting historically, but not really what you want to play. In all honesty, Gorgar is probably the oldest game I would have even been able to name that I would want to play. And I'd say Big Shot, Hot Shot, whatever, was a nice game to find, but we aren't really running well as far as numbers as to which tables I actually did enjoy playing. And certainly you can, for a lot of tables, just look at the artwork and look at the table layout, play it for 30 minutes, and then say, okay, I've had my lifetime fill of that and never come back. So how does this operator's menu work? You said the operator setting on. When it's set to off, the table will return to its normal operation while saving changes you've made in the operation modes. So setting it back to on to reinstate your custom changes. You select open the coin door. You'll hear audio tones as the operator's menu opens. When the tones have finished, you'll see two buttons, enter and dips. Press enter button once to start a combined internal tests of display coils and all those. This displays on the game scoring heads up. In this table, most of the features a user might want to change are not located in the operator's menu. Are they located back of the box as a row of dip switches, which dips stand for dual inline pins. A lot of chips were dual inline pin style, so there's a row of pins at the top, a row of pins at the bottom, and they tend to be spaced out at the same place. Dip switches would be just something that would either physically connect a pin to the top to a pin at the bottom or vice versa. They tended not to be any more complicated than that. So there probably is a dip switch, for instance, to change it to 5 balls and maybe increase the score or do some other things. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some audio off completely mode or quiet mode. Use the back button to navigate back of the operator's menu and the tables menu. What's funny is Like, this button that says manual doesn't seem to pop up a manual. And it's not doing like this Steam overlay or anything either. Alright, so let's see how this works. Changing operator's mode from the default settings will not allow you to achieve any goals, high scores, or post to the leaderboard. Okay, good to know. Alright, and so this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like when you open the menu. And then hitting the back button seems to have oddly taken, hitting the B button seems to have taken me back to out, but it took forever to load. Alright, well, let's see what inner does. Inner seems to let you cycle different LEDs. This would be obviously if you wanted to test if a LED needed to be replaced, or I guess these would be still bulbs of some sort. Hitting enter again seems to have done nothing else. I would have kind of expected the pop-up bumpers to trigger and some other things to trigger. A full diagnostic of a pinball table, though, probably would mostly be around the idea of taking the top glass off and just touching the rubber, feeling the rubbers, throwing a ball against the targets, making sure all the drop targets will fall down. See what the dip switches are. So we can change that from 3 to 5. We can go from novelty to replay to extra balls. So this game does have extra balls. Which I don't know what novelty means. It's completely dropping the explanations. Match on versus match off. Target spots Paragon. Let's turn that on. We can increase the saucer bonus to 3,000, put in 3 bonuses versus 500 points and 1 bonus. Saucer scanning, don't scan, keep scanning. Waterfall Lane. 5,000 not lit at start, 5,000 lit at start. And the asterisks just mean default. In-lane targets 1,000, where you can make it 3,000. Water drop-down targets special once, unlimited. So, seems like almost every default option is by default better, not worse. So you notice there is no opportunity here to change the number of balls down to 1 ball, for instance. And then credits, I assume. I assume credits would be something on this screen. Nope, that seems like it's not doing anything. Perhaps it doesn't do anything. So yeah, the inner button seems like it cycles through several different options, but without any manual to explain what this does. They're kind of crazy. And then credits, I assume, I guess, is not actual credits showing up on the screen. It's probably adding credits to the game as far as coins. And then I'll hit the B button and it takes forever to load. And then I really am just going to play like one game here with this. Like, under extras, there is still only a flyer. You would think there would be a manual there. Like under camera, I guess maybe you could lock the cameras. I think some of the buttons I can press on the controller change those settings anyways. Alright, well, let's start and see how this plays with 5 balls. And give it... Man. Flippantly launching the ball should really cause it to work. Well, I can immediately see by getting rid of the scanning, you have an actual chance to spell Paragon versus it just randomly scanning. And I have got 8,800 points there. So now it very much is, it's much more doable. You kind of have a logical fallacy here in that it is very possible that there are some pinball tables out there that arcade owners would have gotten together and had conference calls and meetings of minds with other arcade members and said, actually, we think the table plays better with these settings than the default settings. So I imagine there are some settings that were almost universally used, even if they weren't the default settings. In fact, even the game distributors themselves may have set the settings differently before delivering them versus what the original defaults were. I'm sure there was all kinds of newsletters and industry insider communiques around those ideas. And not all arcade owners were just out to get as much money as possible. There is a high danger in an arcade when you have emotional, energetic teenagers playing arcade machines that if they get frustrated, they will potentially just slam their fist on the glass and break it, and that is not a scenario what you want to have. You want to create good experiences as much as possible. See, and that's like 80,000. That was a much better game, having 5 balls and getting rid of the scanning. The other settings are not so important. Like getting a few more scores for doing things is nice, but it doesn't actively change the feeling of playing the game directly. That being said, as much as you can change little things in the dip switches, and frankly, a lot of the other tables would have been nice if you could have made more changes. Although arguably some of those tables couldn't have changed much because of just how they were built in the circuitry there. I almost spelled Paragon. I need to get one more drop target. And I'm either on ball 2 or have 2 balls left. Yep, that was ball 2. So Paragon is spelled. So at least we can see that now we probably will get a bonus of some sort next time we sync that. The drop down targets on the left did not stay down. As you get to more modern tables, more settings being changeable would be nice. But at a certain point, unless you're going to make a table your favorite and really play it like crazy and make your own kind of custom game, fiddling with settings on a table that you still don't like is not really worth your effort. And it would be practically impossible to physically mod a table like this to make slight changes to your taste. You could add a thing here and there, but gluing like a plexiglass wall down and or adding another bumper is unlikely to happen. It's gonna be a hard shot. So I'm at like 275,000 because I spelled all of Paragon. Almost certainly the wizard goals would be around the idea of pulling that off legitimately with 3 balls. And you definitely can see a flaw in this table's design in that it's got some things in there it would like you to do, but you're kind of unlikely to be able to pull that off more than once in a game, not unless you are just an excellent player. And since it is still only a 6-digit display, I'm at like 445,000. I'm halfway towards maxing and rolling over the display. You can also see an inefficiency in the idea of having 6 LCD screens that display different scores instead of simply having one score. Interestingly, that did just get me the achievement for having a high score, which that seems weird, to say the least, that you can have your own personal high scores set however you want, but like everything else is a hassle. And see, now that I've logged in, theoretically the leaderboards would pop up, but it didn't. Yeah. So I want to see the all-time score overall, and it's defaulted to friends. So you have, assuming these people aren't cheating, you have a fairly high difference in high scores in the top 10 of all-time people who bothered to make an account and play this game, because you're down to 524,000, and you would think anybody who had played the game enough would have gotten that. Like, I shouldn't be beating number 10. This could also be fake scores, and that the leaderboards are mostly being faked and no longer maintained. But, you know, by the time you're at 20, the high score is 181,000. By the time you're at 30, the high score is 41,000. That's crazy. That's crazy that I would be the 28th highest overall. Oh, I guess this is weekly score. Or is it weekly score? That might make more sense. Yeah, monthly, here you have someone who's obviously cheated. And then you've got higher scores than that. See, overall my score. Yeah, for the month I'm at 110, and then all time I'm at 6,400. That seems much more realistic. And then overall you've got quite a few people who are just straight up hacking the scoreboards. These are just made up scores. You're not going to get that much, not by either glitch or skill. In fact, looking at this table and knowing you play with 3 balls, even 100 million seems unrealistic. I could think maybe 3 or 4 million would be realistic scores, but I couldn't imagine anything higher than that. So what I'm looking for here is where's the real gap where people stopped cheating the scoreboards and hacking the scoreboards. It's over 500 scores that I would immediately dismiss as being fake. 20 million? I could kind of imagine having a great game and getting to 20 million, but I still kind of don't believe it. Let's see, 2 million seems believable when we're starting to hit these scoreboards. This really was a great table to go on these side rants though, and I am in definitely a weird position where I'm not sure what I really am criticizing here, whether it's the table so much or the interface. There's kind of a seedy underbelly to Pinball Arcade in general, in the sense that yeah, it gives you pinball tables. Yes, they're a little expensive. A lot of them are not available for purchase by today's days. There's probably a much better argument to play Pinball FX3, and you'll get, I think, a lot, if not all, of the same tables on Pinball FX3. Once Pinball Arcade lost the licenses to the big tables, once that happened, that turned, I think, that killed any momentum for Pinball Arcade to try and develop their own tables, which they never did create a single table for them, for their own IP. But yeah, you're up to 1,000, and that's 981, whereas my score was 50,000. So 20 times better than games I've played. That seems believable. Let's see, if we were to just turn operator mode back off, then you are just back to your regular game. There's really no telling if you can land on the same letter or whether it will jump forward to the next letter when spelling Paragon. So it might be potentially insanely difficult to actually try and spell Paragon with the letters scrolling like they do, because if the P is the last letter you need to do, yeah, that's exactly the case too, because I just landed on the A and I had already landed on the A. So the odds of getting the right letter lit up is practically none. This is a table that is just not QA'd well at all. It's not designed well to actually have you succeed. And that certainly explains why you aren't... I'm not getting very high scores at all. Speaking of hacking, there is also an argument that $600 is $600 and not being available for purchase, as far as I can tell, to get cabinet mode for Pinball Arcade does pretty much just then put it into the concept that the cabinet mode version of this program is pretty much abandonware, and at that point I can't really shed a tear if somebody were to go find a hack to unlock cabinet mode if they wanted to try it. Like, if you're not willing to sell it, or if you're charging a ridiculous amount of money. I probably did spend I would hope it was only like $150 at most to buy all these tables. There's a decent amount of them, but if you're paying kind of a premium of $1 for each, like, I could see that being fairly expensive. Also, there are apparently some glitches for the glow ball pack, and we have like a Doctor Who pack and some of these skin packs that are just totally unnecessary to be available for purchase. I kind of don't hate the idea of potentially supporting Pinball Arcade by buying skins like this, even if you're never going to use them, except for the fact that they're just not making new tables. The Frankenstein is the latest table, and that seemed to be about in October, where it would certainly have made more sense to it would make a lot more sense to try and have a new table every month, at least have something new to sell, even if it was just a remaster or reskinning of old tables. There seems to be a free tournament that happened, and somebody got 555 something points. That might be that secondary score. And overall, somebody has 24,000. Pinball FX2 makes its tournaments and all of that work a lot better. But also notice there's no tournament going on. You would think that a tournament would happen each month. So then there's this beta online play. How can this game have online play coming soon when it's just not there? And maybe I should launch this game in the DirectX 9 version and just make sure that there's not anything different there. But yeah, it's really hard to justify in retrospect now playing Pinball Arcade or buying Pinball Arcade. It makes a lot more sense to play Pinball FX3, and frankly it makes some sense to even not bother with that and instead just get an At Games pinball cabinet and try your best with that, or hack that enough that I could play pinball games from something else, probably Pinball FX3. And yeah, Pinball FX3 does have new tables. I guess the challenges probably were already made, so they probably were fairly easy to leave in the game. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.